Hello, I'm Tony Burke with lbdigest.com, and this is a quick look at the Coyote Point Equalizer 8.0 load balancing platform. Before taking a look at the new 8.0 release, let's first review the Equalizer 7 release series, which I have running here on a Coyote Point E350 SI. To demonstrate the 7 release in action, I'm going to configure a quick virtual cluster with a single web server sitting behind it. Coyote Point uses a two-tiered abstraction with multiple real servers configured to a virtual cluster. The first step in this process is to configure a virtual cluster. We'll give this virtual cluster a name and IP address as well as configure the port, and look over the various options available to this virtual cluster. One option that I'm going to change is the spoof option so that the equalizer performs a full NAT, which is necessary for my test network. Next, I'll configure the IP address of my web server, which I have pre-configured. It's just a simple Ubuntu web server running Apache. With those two steps completed, I can punch in the IP address of the virtual cluster in my address bar and test to see if the website comes up. Now, let's take a look at what has changed in the Coyote Point Equalizer 8.0 release. As you can see, the aesthetic changes are significant, with a totally new layout and color scheme. Functionally, one of the first differences to notice is that the performance statistics are now prominently displayed on the left, which is quite handy. As we did for the 7.2 release, we'll configure a quick virtual cluster with a single web server behind it. When adding a new virtual cluster, there is a new Ajax-style cluster wizard. The cluster options are more user-friendly, especially to those that are more server-oriented. I'll give the cluster a name and IP address and leave the default port, just as I did before. Clicking commit, and the cluster is created. Again, I'm going to change the spoof option, which is a requirement of my test network. The next step is to add my test server to this virtual cluster. I'll give it a server name, IP address, and leave the default port. Notice as I add the requisite information, the Add Server wizard will validate the format of my IP address. Now that the server is added, I can punch in the IP address of the virtual cluster and test out the website.